First and foremost, the starter. I'm going to create a separate video to explain how you can get one or how you can make one, but for purposes of this video we're just going to go ahead and explain how you feed it leading up to the baking. So what you do first is feed it twice the day before you intend to cook. On a normal week, if you're keeping it out of the fridge, you're gonna want to feed this at least once a day. But you can also store it in the fridge. If you put it in the fridge, you only have to feed it like once a week. But you're gonna have to take it out of the fridge and feed it a few times before baking it. And the way you feed it is, for example, if you've got 100 grams of starter, you feed it with 50 grams of water and 50 grams of plain flour. I prefer an organic plain flour. Then you stir it and you let it rest. So I know that this container weighs 600 grams, so there is 83 grams of starter in there. Because I need to feed this twice, I'm gonna throw some of the starter away, just so after my second feed I end up with about 200 grams. The best way to do that is for me to get rid of about 30 grams, so I end up with about 50 grams. I've ended up with, well, 54 in total, but it's fine, it doesn't have to be exact. This time I'm not throwing any out, as I mentioned earlier. There's 104 grams in here. As I said, this weighs 600 grams. So I'm going to feed it with 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. So there's about 210 grams of starter in there, and this is sort of the consistency that you're looking for. So it's baking day and it's 9 AM in the morning. So if we check our starter, it should be nice and bubbly and airy like this. In terms of your equipment, you'll need scales, you'll need a bowl to mix everything in, you'll need a proving basket in order to prove it. If you don't have this, it's fine, just use a bowl and a clean towel. You can just put it in like this and then flour it and use that instead of a proving basket. A proving basket is really good. A dough scraper, really handy. It only costs a few quid and it's really useful. And I highly recommend getting some sort of a cast iron or casserole pan, anything in which a bread would fit. Because it really helps the rise of the dough. Basically, it creates a nice steamy atmosphere inside, and without it you might not get as good of a rise. And like a baking paper or like a reusable baking sheet, something like that, which you can line at the bottom of your pan. In terms of our ingredients, we of course need our starter. And we also need some form of white flour. As long as it's got 12 grams of protein or more, then it's fine. It doesn't really matter if it's plain or strong flour. And I also mix in various types of either brown or variety of brown flours. As I'll talk about this later, but completely optional and up to you. And of course some sort of salt. So you've got 288 grams of tepid water, which is some hot water mixed with room temperature. Make sure it's not hot because we're going to be adding our starter. And as you can see, your starter should float. So I've got 160 grams of starter in there. Don't forget to feed your starter before you put it away. Now we're going to add 8 grams of salt. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stir all this until it's all nicely combined with water and dissolved. 350 grams of white flour and about 75 grams of this granary bread flour, and then also 75 grams of strong brown flour. So then you just with a spoon start integrating everything until you don't see the dry bits of flour anymore. At this point, just get in there with your hands. Just let it sit here for a few minutes and let the flour absorb the water. So it's been about 3 minutes. That means we can start kneading it. It's going to be super sticky. We're not going to be using any additional flour until very end. What we're going to do is just knead, and the best kneading technique is the slap and fold. So what you're going to do is you're going to lift it up from the middle, you're going to slap it down, stretch towards you, and then lift it back over itself. Just keep doing this for about 5 minutes, I would say. As we're approaching the 5 minutes, you should be able to see that it's less sticky now. It's a bit more tight. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let it rest for a couple of minutes while you wash your bowl, because we're going to need that. Make sure that you clean and dry your bowl, and then we're just going to add just a bit of oil and just spread it around in there, get it ready for the dough. So it's been about 2 minutes, and now we're just going to shape it into a ball. Shouldn't be sticky, should be like that, and just lift it up, facing up into the bowl. Cover it with a damp muslin cloth. For point of reference, this is what it looks like as we put it away. So damp cloth goes at the top, and then just some clean tea towels. Cover it like this and put it somewhere in a room temperature, in a warm place. Now, and as you can see, it has risen. The goal here is to get the air out, punch the air out from the dough, because we're gonna have to make it rise for the second time. And then we're just gonna fold it back into itself, and we're gonna rest it for a few minutes. It's been about 4 minutes. So yeah, anytime I say rest, it can be anytime between 2 to 5 minutes. Actually, the longer, the better. We're just gonna start shaping it and making it into a bowl, which is gonna hold its shape. That's the goal here. So if I let it go, okay, that's not bad. If you look from the bottom, you kind of see we're going to use generous amounts of flour. I'm going to put some more, again, just to prevent it from sticking. I'm going to shape a bit more. Then I'm going to flip it with the seam side up, upside down. So that's the bottom now, and the top is at the bottom. And then cover, as we did before, 2 tea towels, let it proof again, and then we're going to flip it over into our pan. This is what it looks like right now, and we're going to score it. An important piece of equipment that I forgot to mention earlier was a razor. So just making sure to cut into it. Final step, I'm just going to put some water underneath it and give it that steamy atmosphere that I talked about in order to prevent it from solidifying too early. So you end up with like a wet top part of the casserole dish. I'm just gonna put this on top. Let's see what we got. That's what it looks like. So I recommend putting it on a wire mesh, something like this. You will want to cut this when it's just slightly warm, essentially. So the bread is just warm to the touch, definitely not hot. And I'm just gonna cut into it. This is what we have. Well, what we do is keep it in a plastic bag like this one. Otherwise, if you just keep it out, it will harden within 2 days. Whereas this way you can keep up to maybe 5-6 days at a stretch. Another option is to slice it all up, put it in a plastic bag and freeze it. I've already explained how to maintain a sourdough starter and how to use it, but how do you get one? There are a few options. First is that you buy one. That's what I did. I ordered mine on eBay. I can send you a link to that particular seller. They will send you it in like a plastic bag, which then you just have to feed. That's one option. Second one is to get it from me. So if you live close to me, I'm happy to just leave it out on the doorstep. You can come and collect it, or you can make your own. But this last option takes some time, so it will take at least 7 days. What you do is essentially just mix some water and flour. As I mentioned, for example, 25 grams of water, 25 grams of flour. Mix it, leave it out on the counter, and then just keep feeding it every day until it starts to become bubbly. That's because in the air there is natural wild yeast which the flour will trap, and you will end up with a sourdough starter. But that, depending on the temperature and many different things, that could take at least 1 week up to 2 or 3 weeks. But if that's the only choice that you have, then you're gonna have to do that. And if you haven't got a cast iron pan or a casserole pan in which you can bake the bread in, you can just bake it on a tray. So you do everything that I explained earlier, and you just put the dough onto a tray, put that in the oven, and underneath that put a tray with some boiling water. So that will evaporate during the baking process, and it will create a steamy atmosphere inside the whole oven, and that will give you a nice rise. Also, once you get comfortable with the sourdough baking process, you can experiment with higher hydration of the dough. The recipe that I'm using uses 288 grams of water for 500 grams of flour. That's quite low amount of hydration, meaning that the dough is fairly easy to manage. It's not as sticky. But you can go up all the way to like 350 grams of water per 500 grams of flour. That will give you potentially bigger holes and perhaps a bigger rise, but that will mean the dough will be stickier and it's not going to hold its shape as well, so it is tricky. So that will, I suggest starting off with the recipe that I gave you with 288 grams of water, and then if you want to start experimenting, you can start using more water. I've now told you everything that you need to know to make your own sourdough bread. If you got any questions, feel free to get in touch. I'm happy to answer them. Meanwhile, feel free to experiment with types of flour, amount of water, the proving times, all that stuff. So enjoy and happy baking.